Welcome, Jonathan Rose, to the annual conference of the ULI in Amsterdam 2022.
Thank you, Tracy, and it's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to meet you. Too bad you couldn't physically join us, but thank you for taking time to do an interview on Zoom. I wanted to congratulate you with your ULI Prize for Visionaries in Urban Development of 2021. It's only the newest of many prizes which have been awarded to you for your role as a champion of inclusive, equitable, and sustainable development. And you have worked all over the US, and you have had many projects in which you show that it is possible to make our cities a force for positive change. How do you do what you do, Jonathan?
Ooh, thank you.
Ooh.
That's a very interesting question. So first of all, the most important thing is it's impossible to do alone. And so I have a wonderful team of partners and colleagues. And that's actually a really interesting point, which is that when I started my company, I thought my job was to be the best project manager in the world. And I worked 24/7, and I built some amazing award-winning projects very early in my career, and woke up one day 11 years later and realized I had 7 employees and I was essentially doing almost all the work. And then I had to build an organization, and that building an organization is a different skill from building a project. And so I actually think, and for all ULI members, we actually need to think about two trajectories. One is a vision for the world. What would make the world a better place? And how can we contribute to it? There's a lot of very interesting work on what are called purpose-driven organizations, and mine is, and I think many of ours are. And their mission is not to, number one, for profit, but rather to solve world problems, the social and environmental problems of our times. And I can't think of a better platform for that than real estate. It's an amazing way to have a purpose and to help make the world a better place. But the second thing is we actually have to, so we have to learn a lot about that. So we have to study a lot about the sociology and economics and all the psychology, infrastructure, all the ecological issues, all the issues that we're intersecting with. But the second thing is we have to learn a lot about organizational science and how you actually build an organization, motivate people, integrate teams, because it's way beyond our company. We have to build relations with architects and engineers and cities and financiers. So there's a skill called network weaving. And I think perhaps that's one of the most important skills to be able to get this kind of work done.
You have described you've given a number of TED Talks and also talks about your new book that we'll come back to in a moment. And you called it Building Wellbeing, and at the same time creating value. And I'm curious to hear more. Building well-being is a big agenda in itself. And how do you do that and still create value and keep your business and that of your investors afloat?
Great. And by the way, we've actually done very well as a business and for our investors. And the goal and the reason is, if you do a little bit of ESG, if you try and be a little bit green or a little bit improving of social, then those efforts become a tax or add friction to your work. But if you deeply embed it and make it the core of the work, I'll give you an example, then it actually, it's really deeply integrated. We find that it creates not only environmental and social values, but also economic value. So for example, we will invest in any greening project, any climate reduction or toxic chemical reduction or whatever in our projects that has a 5-year payback or better. That's a 20% return, and it's non-correlated, which means that it's ticking along whether there's a recession or a boom. So it's actually very good. It's a very positive contributor to our work. And then what we found is if we go even deeper, in the United States, many cities have things called green banks that'll make 1% loans. We can borrow money more cheaply for our main mortgages. There are a lot of incentives. There's tax incentives, there's other. So starting with that 5-year payback, and then we go deeper and deeper and deeper into the greening side. And what we find is we're able to bring in better and better financial resources and actually improve both the resilience of the project and the returns. And then what that means is that when something happens like we're all experiencing today, this rapid rise in fossil fuel costs, we're using a whole lot fewer fossil fuels, so we're even more resilient and even is further enhancing returns. So we're always looking for those sweet spots where our environmental and social values and our economic values align.
Does that mean that our banking system and our governmental system have figured this out and are now helping to actually facilitate this kind of revitalization?
I would say that they're in the beginnings of doing that, and they have a lot of programs for early adopters. And we love
Well,
those
you are
programs
definitely
and we
one.
use them. So what we're really trying to do as a company is demonstrate how these ideas can succeed and then hope to make them systems wide. So the same thing I mentioned on the environmental side, we're doing the same thing on the social side, connecting with not-for-profits and government agencies to bring social health and education programs to our residents. And again, these are programs that in the United States, at least, often happen in disparate pieces. And we're showing that if we can integrate them on site in a property, that you not only get much better outcomes for the people, but for the agencies that are delivering these services, it's also more cost effective.
Because the social model you're creating is also more sustainable.
Right.
I noticed looking on your website at your projects, none of them are just one thing. They're low income housing or middle income housing, plus public space, plus schools, plus childcare, plus. Is this the multidisciplinary character that we need to work towards to keep our cities or make our cities healthy and safe again?
Absolutely. And we call this developing communities of opportunity. So in the United States, America is deeply divided by zip code. There are locations in which people will live to be 80 years old, and there could be literally a mile and a half away a location where, for a variety of factors, access to healthy food and maybe pollution, that people may only live statistically to live 60 years old. There are locations in which almost every child goes to college and locations in which almost no child goes to college. Our mission is to take these struggling and often lower income locations and to make them mini zip codes of opportunity. That they are places, if you live there, you would have the health and education and social outcomes of much better places. And that creates kind of seeds of opportunity for both our residents and for the neighborhoods.
But this goes far beyond what is normally seen as the mandate of a developer.
Well, it just depends on what you think the mandate of a developer is. I think the mandate of a developer is to make the world a better place. You know, we live in a world with many issues that need to be solved. And if we stand still, we're not going to solve them. We only solve them by moving forward, by leaning into them. I mean, I think being a developer is one of the most amazing creative roles in the world that we can possibly have, because we have this chance to imagine a future and actually create it. And it's not perfect, but we can model something, learn from it, and then redo it again. So I think it's absolutely let's not say the responsibility of the developer, but the amazing opportunity for developers to integrate, to create, and to think about what are the problems that they would like to address, and then to address it. What a fantastic profession to be in.
You said in one of your talks that something happened in 1994 which opened your eyes to the necessity of working in a different way on our cities. What was that?
So I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I will tell you a story. So I developed a project very early in my career called the renovation of the Denver Dry Goods Building. It was a time in which cities were being emptied out in America. There was a great growth towards the suburbs. And I started working in Denver, which had, again, become, everything was being suburbanized. And literally the downtown at 5 o'clock after people left for work was just empty, entirely empty. The city had bought an old department store that was closed down in the very heart of the city and had gone through 4 developers. They'd all failed to redevelop it. And so they came to me, or I went to them. And I think I was this tiny little startup then. I don't think they really had any other choice. And I had a lot of enthusiasm, so they went with me. But anyway, What we did is we redeveloped this whole full city block old department store as mixed use, mixed income, green, and they were just putting in a new light rail line, so transit oriented. And also, it was an old building, so it was historic preservation. And it modeled the future of what the city could be. And after a lot of complexity, it took 23 pieces of financing. It was an amazing success. And it brought back retail to the downtown, new retail that hadn't been there in 20 years, and mixed income housing and offices. And we took this complicated financing model and we simplified it. And then the Denver Urban Renewal Authority spread that. And within 3 years, 22 other old abandoned buildings in downtown Denver were renovated. And with those, all our buildings together, we created a community, we created a cluster, we created energy, and it spurred the whole revitalization and moved back to the city. So one of the lessons from that is that obviously integrating all these elements really creates social and economic benefit. And I think number two is that as developers, we can create models. We can't change the whole world, but we have the opportunity to make a model for how to solve a problem. And if it works, it's going to get duplicated by others and spread. And again, that's a very high leverage thing to be able to do.
Your newest book is called The Well-Tempered City. And as every music lover will know, the well-tempered is a reference to Bach, the wohltemperierte Klavier. What did you learn from Bach for your practice as a developer?
Thank you. It's a great question. So my view of Bach was that we know he was a deeply religious man, and that he had a view of the magnificent architecture of the universe, and that he tried to capture that architecture in musical form. And if you listen to his music, it's magnificent. The other interesting thing was that this idea of temperament, which is a tuning system, transformed the way music could be written and performed. Prior to that, we could only perform in one scale or one key at a time. Two things happened. This idea of temperament, which is a different tuning system, came about, which allowed us to go between scales. And the second thing was this new musical instrument, the clavier, which is the forerunner to the piano, got invented. So in effect, Bach got this new technology and this basically new hardware, new software, and it allowed him to unleash this incredible, magnificent, to increase the complexity of his music to begin to reflect his spiritual aspirations. So I say that's the same thing we can do with cities. Our technologies are continually evolving and becoming more sophisticated. The software by how we imagine them, run them, plan them, how we can do scenario planning and future casting is all evolving. And let's take this hardware and software and also have a vision, a spiritual vision for what the beautiful integration of well-being and compassion and environmental balance could be, and to begin to reflect those on earth in our cities.
Well, I understand that Bach was an inspiring example for you, Jonathan, and I know that your work is also inspiring to many developers who have followed in your footsteps. And I think it's clear that the prize for visionaries in urban development is well spent on you.
Well, thank you. By the way, I want you to know that I love the city of Amsterdam. I draw a lot of, The Hague's pretty good too, but I draw a lot of inspiration from it was a really well-planned city. And it's a fantastic, livable place to be, as are many of the Northern European cities. And so those are really important models for me. So I say to your audience, you have a really precious, amazing legacy. I'm seeing some really interesting architecture also emerging. And so I just want you to know that it's a place that I come to learn from.
Come visit us soon.
I look forward to it.
Thank you very much for this interview, Jonathan Rose.
Thank you.